Hello, everyone. Nice to see folks joining today. Cameras on, off, whatever feels right in this time of many more virtual meetings. It's good to see the faces that are here. And it is a real delight today to introduce and have with us Dr. Celiane Camargo-Borges, who is one of the contributors of the Creative Futures volume. Her chapter that she wrote with Kenneth Gergen is Social Construction and the Forming of Futures. And she's a senior lecturer and researcher at Breda University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands. She is also a faculty member and executive board member of the Taos Institute. She's a psychologist who employs a constructionist theory and design thinking approach to creating more participatory formats of learning and innovation in society. And she's the author of several articles, has contributed chapters to various handbooks, the Sage Handbook of Social Construction, the Handbook of Arts-Based Research, and the Handbook of Creative Futures, which is what we're here today to chat about. And we're more than halfway through this author series and contributor series, and it's just been really wonderful to see the various entry points and invitations into this idea of creative futures. And so it's great to have you here, Celiane, today to talk about this subject and welcoming everyone who's here. And just a reminder that, please feel free to post questions into the chat or reflections or things as we pass by in conversation that you just want to make a note of. It's always great to have a lively chat going if that feels like another place to have conversation. And as we've done in all of these sessions, we'll start out, Alfonso and I will start out by asking a few questions that kind of take us through 20 to 30 minutes. And then we open it up for conversation, for others to chime in, ask questions and engage. So that's our agenda really for the next hour or so. And just so you all know, I will be popping off about quarter to the hour because of a medical appointment that I have been waiting for ages to land, and it finally did. And I'm sure you all know we don't get to choose when that happens. So I'll leave you in good hands. So it's great to be here. And Alfonso, do you want to frame us in and ask the first question?
Sure. Yeah, I was rereading your wonderful chapter that you co-authored with Ken Gergen, and it was just such a compelling and crisp kind of summary of the whole idea of social construction and its implications for so many different things, but of course also this context of that we're exploring, which is the future. And I was wondering what drew you to social construction? What is it that appealed to you and in the context of your journey?
Thank you. Well, hello, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you, Gabrielle and Alfonso, for the invitation. It is a privilege to be part of this collection, and this book responds not just to the urgency to reimagine futures, but also it responds to the need of different approaches and disciplines to innovate and to create new futures. I also believe it responds to the need to combine theory and practice, to go beyond research and education. We really need to go beyond these worlds of dichotomies. So I've read the chapters, and I think the authors propose so beautifully to create futures where we can expand dichotomies. And I have been working with social construction for a long time. And I remember my first encounter was during my master's. And when I start reading about social construction and I start understanding the profundity of how our realities are constructed by people in their relationships and in the context of culture, politics, this was such a life change to me that I start embracing not just professionally, but also as a mindset. And a mindset of looking at people and place and context as one possible way of existing. So trying to get out of foundational beliefs, but really looking at if this has been constructed at some point in life, if it's not fulfilling anymore our environment, we can change it, we can reconstruct it, we can reframe, we can shake the meaning. And by creating new meanings, we create new actions, and eventually new realities will be formed. So to me, this is a very powerful theory, or we could call philosophy, ways of thinking, epistemology, and it is a combination. I think this chapter comes together with all sorts of approaches that I would say that makes the relational turn. So constructionism is one of them. So to me, that's how my interest emerged and keeps growing, especially nowadays when we look at these complex problems we are facing. We really need approaches that look at, I believe, at the relationality. And I was just reading again Capra's chapter where he says the way of sustain life is to build and nurture communities. So when we are building and nurturing communities, we are also focusing on relationships and connection.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Opening and framing of constructionism in this. And I just, as I was listening to you, a question that came to mind is, I mean, you spoke of when constructions no longer serve, what new ones do we create? And I'm really curious in your work and perspective in this, both I think as a scholar, but someone who is also actively working with organizations and communities. Do you see deconstruction efforts of, I think of it often in my work as hospicing old systems, hospicing ways that are no longer working for us. How does that come into the work of social constructionism, as well as, as the building towards futures?
Yeah, beautiful, this hospicing metaphor. Well, constructionism works a lot with, focuses pretty much on language. And when we talk about language, it's not the verbal language, but all the way in which we communicate and we frame. So we say words create worlds. So metaphors, I believe they are very important in inviting new framings. So we could talk about deconstructing, but also, I want to share with you that this week I'm also participating in a conference about regeneration that's called Regenerative Europe. So it's a movement with many different practitioners and scholars that are trying to invest in what would be the next step of sustainability. And as I'm preparing my talk, I was thinking, well, regeneration is also about forming new futures. Because when we talk about sustainability, usually we focus on, there's a problem, something is wrong, we need to fix it. And in the regenerative approach, they try to look at what's happening right now. How can we embrace it in a way that we can regenerate something that brings more desirable futures? So it's not about fixing, and I would say it's not even about deconstructing, but it's about regenerating. And in that sense, I think it's very much connected to the purpose of this book. So how can we promote creative futures? How can we form regenerative futures so that we stop looking at the past and how to fix it, and usually fixing it with the same logic of the problems that were created, but looking more ahead of us and like from now, what we have, how can we together regenerate into something that might be more useful, meaningful, and sustainable for all of us.
I'm really curious. Thank you for that. And I'm just curious now as I'm listening to you. I mean, I know both you and Ken have written extensively about social constructionism. And I'm really curious, as you partnered in this particular chapter, and the invitation to look at social construction through this lens of creative futures, or this invitation, what did the two of you discover? Did you discover anything new or different as you began to kind of weave those things together? I'm just quite curious how it was different or similar to the other projects that you've worked on together.
Yeah, very good question. You know, to me, it was a privilege to be writing the chapter with Ken Gergen. And Ken Gergen is a mentor, is a friend, a mentor. And he has been forever in social construction, and all these initiatives and projects that he has been working with, and sitting with him and envisioning how this chapter should look like, to me was an experience of stretching into how concepts can be translated into practical action. And I think Ken can be so profound in the philosophy, in the ontology of what constructionism is. And myself right now, I have been so busy into how can we make those ideas into action, and especially working with students, with researchers. When they dive into this kind of ideas, they always feel overwhelmed. They say it makes sense, but it sounds like mystic, in the sense that, what can I do with that? It's beautiful, but I don't know what to do. So my exercise is, how can we create, and here I don't talk about techniques, but resources. How can we have resources that we could immediately act upon those ideas and translate that into, designing conversations to create conditions in which people can connect, can come together, can challenge the status quo. So it can be an invitation. So I think with Ken, it helped me to really go beyond the ideas of writing, but thinking about, okay, how can we translate that into something actionable? How can we trigger this, that people might feel like I can use it, I can embrace it? And I'm grateful for that.
Thank you. Yeah, Gabrielle, I know that this is a topic that you're passionate about, the whole the scholar and practitioner relationship, and all too often divide, right? So the fact that they live in different worlds, and I think it's so essential now to have more dialogue, more interaction, and so that the ideas of the practitioners aren't thin, and and the applications of the scholars aren't also thin. So I think it's exciting to see that relationship in the writing of this of the piece that you wrote for us. That dialogue. Speaking of ideas, I was really impressed by the way you summarized some big ideas about what you call the rational realist view, right? And how social constructionism goes beyond that, so that the reader gets sort of a clear idea also where we're coming from and what some of the potential traps are. Could you tell us a little bit about what you call this rational realist view that is sort of dominated with modernity?
Yeah, sure. So I'm glad you are asking that, and this connects as well with long conversations with Ken, and like how can we set the stage in which we invite the readers to feel free to co-create, to understand the power of crafting a powerful question. So it's all in the mindset. So how can we be, and I think we talk in the chapter, but we were dialoguing a lot about getting out of these constraints of the realism. And we know that this realist, rational view of the world is largely built on this assumption that we have a stable world. And everything, all the knowledge, they are created to crack into the world and really come up into pieces that when you put together, finally you're going to have the full puzzle, and then you understand reality and you can address all the problems. So this modernist approach, this realist approach, is pretty much focused on systematization, specialization, prediction, and control. And we, as you could be the practitioner or the researcher, you are addressed as the expert, the one who knows, and with your techniques, you're going to access reality, and then you will have your knowledge. When you shift this realist approach and you go into this relational turn, then you realize that, well, there is nothing out there waiting to be discovered. But the very first movement of asking a question about reality, it's already a creation of what this reality is, how we experience that. And I find that very powerful, because it doesn't mean so then anything goes, because I have some students, when we talk about the myth of the neutral and objective researcher, and an invitation to embrace your bias and play with your bias, be aware of it and be ethical about it. And sometimes they say, oh, but then you are cheating. Because if you have the bias and then you ask the question you want and then you co-create, so you're cheating. This is not science. This is not research. So it is a very interesting conversation when you can understand and play around, what are we calling reality here? And how can we do this shift to a more relational turn? And how can we see ourselves as part of this reality, constantly creating and recreating, with the sense of stability, but in a continuous movement, which brings a lot of challenges, because it's harder to teach, as you know, complexity topics. So how do you teach, embracing uncertainty? How do I embrace uncertainty? Trust the process. How do I trust the process? So it's a whole new ball game. But when you get into that, it's fun, because it also creates more relational accountability around the context in which you are working with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, it's reminding me when in 2016 I went and studied with Ken and his wife Mary in Swarthmore College, and they bring people together through the Taos Institute to do a weekend on social construction. And the most tangible takeaway I took from that around this, what you were just speaking to around understanding that we're co-creating the moment we're in conversation or we ask a question, was we were sitting in a kind of a hotel room that they had rented for part of the weekend. And, we're sitting around those conference tables and they have the PowerPoints up and the two of them are at the front of the room. And they said, okay, we're just going to do a quick exercise. And that exercise is, we're sitting in groups at these different tables, and we didn't know what each other's instructions were. But one group's instruction was, look at this room through the lens of being an architect. What do you see? What is reality through the lens of an architect? The next group had to look at the room from the context of fire and safety. What's the room look like if you're thinking about the safety of the people inside? The third table, you know, their job was to look at it from the point of view of being burglars or committing theft. And all of a sudden, you know, then it was like, okay, from the perspective of your group, what is this room? And all of a sudden, it became so tangible and real. Oh, yeah, this isn't just a room that's neutral with tables and chairs and windows, but actually the lens that we bring to understanding it, all of a sudden, I would just remember it landed in such a different way. And so I'm just really curious to hear from you, you know, because you're really committed to this sort of these ideas in action, what are the really sort of simple or accessible ways, like the top 3 things you share with groups to invite them, you know, into thinking these ways? I'm really curious about, because, and I think that this is a challenge for scholar practitioners or scholar activists in any field, right? Is this sort of how to take something complex and provide simple or simplicity in entry points. I don't want to say simple, but the simplicity of entry points.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I don't know what would be the top 3. One, so I always, I like to say that you cannot control conversations, but at the same time, they are not random. So they are invitations that takes you to more wanted directions or set the stage for more specific directions. And I really like to work with appreciative inquiry, and especially the appreciative interviews. And to me, it's a very powerful tool when you are working with communities or organizations that are pretty much stuck in a rational way about what the problem is, or what is the case here. And whatever you ask, the answer is so well formed for so many years, and the patterns are there, that's really difficult. And there is this question in appreciative approach that I love to ask, which is, of course, when we play with imagination, and when we play with a future-oriented imagination, you kind of unlock the potential for creating new perspectives. So the question is, let's imagine you woke up 5 years from today and all your dreams came true. So whatever you are hoping for this community just happened. So you woke up and this is happening. What do you see? And this, it looks like magic, because all of a sudden, all these rational answers, because now we are just playing, it's 5 years from now, I'm just imagining, I was in a dream. So then all these bold ideas and unreal ideas starts to pop up. And then the whole scenario starts to be created of something that didn't exist before, couldn't be imagined, and now it's there. The scenario is there. And then once you have the whole imaginative story, then you can slowly bring them back. And you might say, after the whole story, the next question is, okay, let's suppose this will be happening. What is the first thing? Make a list of the first things that you would have to start doing right now in order to make this happen. And then it becomes easier to make a bullet point list of things you want to do to make that happen, because now that scenario is already existing. And after you say, now make a list of things that you should stop doing right now. Then you have 2 lists of things that the community or the organization, they created together, and they can commit on things they want to start doing and things they want to stop doing, because now they have this common vision of the future that was created. So to me, this is one example of a powerful way of designing conversations, using imagination, using the fantasy, using like it is in the future. Yeah, so this is one. I don't know if I can think of another 2.
Oh, that's great. That was a great entry point, and others might come to you as we're together. I mean, the power of imagination, and I'm just, Alfonso, I'm sure you have a question. So actually I'll hold mine. Go for it. And then we'll.
Oh,
then
no,
we'll
go ahead.
open
If it's a follow-up, please just do it.
I mean, the question that I have is, do you encounter in people resistance to that process? Because there is just there are so many reasons, really good reasons, excellent reasons to feel despair, to feel a sense of I actually don't want to go into the possibilities because the constriction and oppression of the reality of our world is so overwhelming. Do you have to work through that with groups that you work with, or how quickly do they jump to that? Does it depend on if a person's kind of naturally optimistic? How do you bring some of the pessimists or cynics along? And I say that because I'm actively one of those people who's working that tension.
Yeah. No, the tension is always there. And I would say that when we are working with sensitive topics or highly complex topics, preparing for the dialogue is as important as the dialogue in itself. So you don't just start with, let's dream it, let's see flowers here, what are the possibilities, because it won't happen. But when you design for the preparation, and that might be different for different groups, but usually when I don't know the group, I take the time to meet each one of them individually and really take the time to see what it is for them individually in that project, in that organization, in that community. So at least you start getting you start bonding with people individually, and you create some empathy. And I don't know if you heard of the Public Conversation Project. It's a project in Massachusetts, and they have this famous paper on a dialogue, pro-choice and pro-life, where they managed to put a group of activists, one in favor of abortion and the other one against abortion. And there's a whole preparation before they come into the room to talk about it. And one element of the preparation is food. Food is always helpful. Food is always something that brings warmth into your heart. And when you sit together to share food, magic happens. And so they invite everyone for a dinner together. And the only rule in this dinner is that you cannot tell from which side you are. So these strangers, they sit together. They cannot say if they are pro-life or pro-choice, but they can talk about anything. And when you sit with strangers over a drink and food, what is the first thing you do? You try to find commonalities. Where you come from, how many siblings, where have you traveled, or what did you study? And then immediately when you find a commonality, oh, me too. Oh, so you kind of connect. And this connection really helps when you have the struggle of the dialogue, because then you are not talking abstract ways, but you're already talking with someone that you have a connection, you had a conversation. And another important element that they talk in this project, always talking from the first person. And when you talk from the first person, you don't say, that's how it's been done. That's how it is. You know, it has been said. No, it's my experience. I believe in this because this is my life story. And then you might disagree, but it cannot be wrong. And so talking in more concrete and story-oriented ways is much more gentle than creating theories about how things should be in the world.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. There's a lot of good material to think about and to work with there. I want to sort of go into a related question and issue. You're Brazilian.
I'm
but you
Brazilian,
teach,
born and
you're
raised,
Brazilian.
100%
but
Brazilian.
but you live in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And so your life is essentially, you've had cross-cultural experiences. You live in a country that isn't your own. And of course, when we go to another country, we notice that life can be different, which can be fun. It can be exhausting. It can be difficult. It can be all sorts of different things. But it definitely shows us that life can be different, and that things that we take for granted in our world, in our universe, in our own country, completely unexpectedly can be very different somewhere else. So my experience has been that sort of loosens up our assumptions about what is, and sort of gives the realist worldview a little bit of an elbow, right?
Yeah.
Maybe can you talk about that a little bit from your experience as well?
Yeah, and to me, the first deconstruction is the deconstruction of the self, because when you go living in a country that's completely different from yours, everything you thought it is yourself, it's your personality, this is how I am, all of a sudden you realize this is so much related to your culture, where you come from, and your belief system, because then life is completely different and people are completely different. And then you also become, oh, look, the sun is coming at the end of the day. So all of a sudden, life is completely different than you thought, and you become different. So you create these multiple selves within you, but also it brings this cultural sensitivity to see that the world is different in different moments and different places. Right now at my university here, I'm part of what they call internationalization circle. So all these efforts to make the university more international. And what I'm trying to challenge there is like, to be international or to have this global mindset, you don't need to live abroad. I mean, it helps, but like, it's not just that. I know lots of people who travel all over the world, but they are not exposed to these cultural differences. So I'm trying to invite also the Dutch students to see that there is variety and multiculturalism within their own country, within their own family. So trying to expand that a little bit, but it is a wonderful experience, sometimes painful, to especially coming from the tropics to the Northern Europe, and having to make sense of how life is and how people behave and how to navigate around that.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. And I know that's an ongoing and important inquiry for you, Alfonso, and it's great to just bring that to all of us to learn from and hear. We'd love to just open it up now for others, questions, reflections, responses. You're welcome to put your hand up. You're welcome to unmute or just type into the chat if you'd like to be added to the list of folks asking questions. But it would be great to hear some voices and perspectives of those of you in the room with us today.
We had a question in the chat from Susan, where she said, this communication structure reminds me of the synergic inquiry process. Does social construction draw upon this? That's a great question.
In the chat, Celiane, if you want to take a look. And Susan, we also invite you to come off of mute if you want to speak in and just add to that more.
Yeah, and I would like to invite Susan to say more about the synergic inquiry process.
Hi there, thank you.
Hi.
The synergic inquiry process, as I understand it, and kind of simplified, is a it's a collaborative action methodology that starts with finding commonalities, and then moves toward acknowledging differences, and then reaches beyond that to transcend differences. And it sounds as though the process that you're describing for this, social construction mirrors that in some way. And I didn't know if that was part of the basis upon which you drew.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm not familiar with this approach. What we talk in social constructionism when we are designing for conversations is how can we find common grounds more than similarities. So we want to live in diversity, but by finding common grounds, then we can have an alignment to go on together. So I'm right now also studying more about authors from the Global South, especially indigenous authors. And there is one Brazilian indigenous called Krenak, a very important activist in Brazil. And he talks about diversity, and he challenges our Western way of talking about diversity. And so he says, when we say diversity and inclusion, we assume that there is a world in which indigenous will be included, in which minorities are welcome to be included. And he says, as indigenous, we don't want to be included in this world. We want to live in diversity and create, they call pluriverse, and be able to create a multiplicity of worlds in which we can live together. So he challenges our idea of, inclusion, finding similarities. But I would say it's important to find common grounds to have this alignment to continue the conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have another question in the chat.
I also see that Alan had raised his hand in the beginning. Alan, I don't know if you want to share.
Alan, please. Leslie.
Well, I'll just share briefly then. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hear me okay? Yeah, I think we've moved beyond what my comment was about, but I want to go back just briefly to Alfonso's comment about living in different cultures, which he has done mightily. I'm living in Ecuador now for another South American citizen for the third year, and I really notice how people position themselves in relation to their families. For example, my grandmother died. I didn't even go to the funeral. It was a long trip. It didn't seem to be any big deal. I come from not only the U.S., but a generation of folks that are very independent. We're all independent. You even look at the psychotherapists that come out of my generation, like Carl Rogers. It's about discovering yourself, who you're going to be. Here in Ecuador, everybody's part of the family. And even a cousin in the hospital, everything stops. Everybody goes in, and I was invited to be, and my wife, part of, I've forgotten what it was called, something the Godfather or something. Anyway, we're part of the family now. It's, and people have names that have, I can't even keep up with how many names each person has, because it represents their whole family and 2 or 3 generations back, and both parents. On the other hand, one of my more sarcastic literary friends here, who I love to talk to because he's so refreshing in a way, he says, you wonder why they have no factories here. Well, that's right. It's like Ireland. Everything stops for everything. And, I've got some people that walk my dogs every morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I never know when they're going to come and say, tomorrow's a vacation. We won't be here. Or we won't be here for the weekend. My wife sort of keeps up with this. But when we first came to Ecuador, especially Cuenca, the little city I live in, my wife and I would joke that you couldn't get to the parade because everybody was already in them. Because we have parades every week or so. We have these big social activities going on all the time. Many of them involve the indigenous people in large numbers. It's not like a few Navajos that have been pushed out of their culture. These are big groups of indigenous people from the Amazon who have political clout. So yeah, it's really different living in this different world where there are no factories. And my wife says it's a lot like Ireland, the Irish, in terms of factories, the Irishmen, you get drunk and take the day off. You can't rely on them to come to work. I don't know whether that's true or not, but yeah, so that was my comment, and doesn't go very deep, but Alfonso's comment triggered me, so there it is. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. We have more questions?
Yes, we had a few more questions. Sarah?
Thank you. Thank you, Celiane. I really enjoyed that. In reading your chapter and reading other things that you've written, I'm really captured by this idea of the shift in perspective from downstream to upstream, and supporting like an upstream investment, you say, in co-creating what can become. I'm wondering if you have any examples of what that looks like, and what different kinds of upstreaming, upstreaming examples that you could provide or speak to, or just speak to that concept and that shift in perspective.
Yeah, and what are you calling the upstreaming? Oh, you moved on my screen.
Yeah. So when we're talking about like problem framing to possibility framing, and then you write, we replace the downstream focus on making predictions based on what has been to an upstream investment in co-creating what may become.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if you have an example, or an example comes to mind of an upstream investment perspective, like from the different projects that you've worked on.
Yeah. Well, when you are focusing on the process instead of the results, so then you focus pretty much on what Sheila McNamee call radical presence. So to be very attentive to the process of relating. And when you are very attentive to that, you might hold your plans lightly. That's how we say, like you have plans. If you're doing your research, you have your research questions, but as you are engaging with people, you open for the possibilities of emergence to happen. And by radical presence, you see what the opportunities are emerging as it happens. And that's why trusting the process and focusing on the process is to be attentive to these happenings. When we are too focusing on proving hypotheses right or wrong, false or true, then we are not awake for this process of relating, and we are not seeing things emerging that might be more relevant to the process. And we don't go after some novelties that are happening there because we are so focused to the end. I remember when I started using constructionism to deconstruct the idea of research as discovering realities and this myth of the researcher's neutral objective. There was this event. I don't know if you remember that, Alfonso. You were in the Netherlands, in Breda, and I asked to record a video with you. And I was curious to know from your creative inquiry perspective, how would you see research and this process of engaging in research? And I remember you used the metaphor of a detective. And you say, well, to me, a researcher is also to be a detective. So you're very attentive to the clues that are emerging. And when they pop up, you just go after the clues, and then you will discover more things. And that always stuck with me, like we are detectives. We are not neutral and objective, just trying to, rely on the methods that we are using, but how can you be attentive to these clues, to what people are telling you, to how people are engaging, and really go after what is emerging in that moment. So, yeah.
And that goes right back to what you were saying about metaphors at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think a detective is in some ways just one of the different sort of metaphors that you can have for what we do, inquiry, right? But also when you fall in love, I mean, you want to know everything about that person. So you're so curious, but your attitude is different from that of the detective, right? So you approach it sort of as a lover. So it's like inquiry as love or something. So I think what I like so much about the constructionist approach that you are developing and are bringing into the world is just this emphasis, as you said, on possibilities rather than on fixing problems, right? Creating possibilities and creating also different understandings of who we are and who we can be, right? And I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why we put the book together, because we felt that there was sort of a shrinking of possibilities and such a focus on problems that people, I mean, did just another article in the Washington Post came out today about the mental health problems of young kids because, they feel like the world is going to hell and there's nothing that gives them a sense of possibility, right? By the way, I should tell you that sorry to get work-oriented here in a way, but my friend Vlad Glavianu, who is a real great creativity researcher and has also written a book, a chapter in the book, has started the Journal of Possibilities and in Society or something like that. So it's all about possibilities. So that might be interesting for you to, I'll send you the info, but it's good to see that there is that emphasis, because I think a lot of people in the end just start feeling so depressed and like, what can I do? If it's not this terrible thing, it's going to be the next terrible thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's just unending disasters. And it's recognizing the reality of problems, but focusing on what can we do and what the possibilities are and mobilizing creativity. So that I think was in 5 pages or so, you managed to really distill a lot of things that, of course, I'm eager to share with my students too, because save me a lot of explaining because you do it a lot better, right? So
yeah, I think this is the beauty of this book. It's a collection of chapters holding such profound topics, in a short, enlightening way. Yeah, beautiful.
Any more questions? Because I'd like to know. Oh, yes, go ahead, Sarah. Yeah.
No, I was just wondering, because when I was writing my proposal for my dissertation, I was really, really stuck on the requirement to write a problem statement, because it automatically puts me into the problem solution. And I was really stuck on, so what's your response to the problem? And that the whole dissertation is about solving a problem. And so I'm wondering, like, how I've been trying to use the language of possibility. So what's the possibility statement? And then what's my response to it? But I'd love to read a dissertation that has that structure around it.
Yeah.
Julia's posted the link to the journal, Possibility Studies
nice.
and Society. So if you,
Good to know.
Nikki, are you moving your arms around, or are you wanting to
I'll jump in
ask
because
something?
I've loved everything that's been said. I just want to echo all of the fabulous comments and gratitude around your participation today. Thank you. You've given me so many ideas. I've already looked you up and I'm looking up all of your wonderful work.
Thank you.
I think the thing I want to take away from this conversation is your emphasis on community building, through psychological safety as a vehicle to find that transformative creativity power, right? Like I hear you say it repeatedly, but this, once people have that sense of grounding, even if they are on other sides of a conversation, even if they are in despair, that can be a place to land before the blossoming can happen. And I really appreciate your reflections on your own experience and particularly the practices for that, because I think so often we skip to the let's be creative part. Like, because hey, look, if you like to play, I like to play, let's play, but so many people are so resistant to play.
Yeah. And also I would add that another group of people, they love playing, but they don't stop to reflect, why are we playing here? What are we changing as we play? So I think we should take advantage, of playing and change.
Actually, the way that you said that, I just want to add one more thing. I had seen it reflected in another discussion, is that sometimes too, we don't always think about the ways that ungrounded play, like you say, like, why are we playing? Ungrounded play can be just a way to keep perpetuating our own biases and prejudices and all the rest. Like people, it's just a game. Oh, we're just playing. And it's like, no, hello. You're just reinforcing stereotypes, racism, misogyny, whatever. And so we can, us holders of creative power. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm
Thank
really open to continue
up.
the conversation. Thanks.
Yeah. Now that's a very important point, and I think that thank you for emphasizing that, Nikki and Celiane, for bringing that up. That need to create the context, right? Because as you mentioned also, Nikki, people come in with different assumptions about what a game is and what play is and what, and some of it can be rough and not stimulate creativity. It's all about who wins, right? By the way, I'm rereading this again, which I think is a fabulous little book, Finite and Infinite Games. If you get a chance to read it, it really talks to what we're, one of the things that we're discussing here. We have a few minutes left. Celiane, where to next for you? What's happening next in your life? You're enjoying the beautiful Dutch weather that just reminds you of, Copacabana and, right?
That is the endless way of living here, like, nice to be in Europe, but always suffering with the weather. So it's never perfect. But so we are developing right now a project with Brazil. And so we want to connect this plurality of knowledges. So Dutch students are connected with Brazilian students, and together they're going to go to indigenous community in Brazil to co-create stories and to do a documentary where their voice can be and their stories can be told in the global north. So this is quite exciting. And I'm looking forward to see this happening. And I'm busy with thinking about the future of education. If you guys are connected to universities, you know that there's a lot of obsolete things in there. So we also need to regenerate and create new futures within academia.
Yeah, that's certainly an area. Also here where, a lot of the schools that kids go to are just a way to keep them quiet and pacified, and it's really dramatic. So that's fantastic. Any last words, Celiane, about that you would
just
like to share?
Gratitude. I'm just happy to be here. It's nice to work with you, Alfonso, and I'm your fan. Whatever you do is nice to be part of, and nice to see
the feeling is mutual.
So I really hope the conversation continues. So you guys just feel free to email me. We can have another virtual coffee and just continue that.
Terrific. And I'll make an effort to drag you into more projects. I hope you'll have time, but
I would love
you'll be
to.
hearing more.
Good.
Great. Well, thank you
you.
so much, Celiane. And thank you
Thank
for everybody for
you.
being here. Thank you also, two of the contributors, Dr. Nick Walker, Leslie Combs. So thank you, everybody. Take care.